the job of the accelerator is to actually figure out which ones don't work. I think at the early stages, if you can figure out that something, there's no opportunity there and you've only invested 3, 6, 12 months into it, that's a win, because then you can go on to move on to the next idea or the next opportunity for you.
Hello. I am super duper excited. Episode 54 of the Afternoon Tea has a wonderful gentleman by the name of Marlon Thompson joining me. Marlon, before we start our blah blahs, let me give you a very deep and rich introduction that is Marlon Thompson. Marlon Thompson is an angel investor, startup founder, and experienced advocate for diversity in business. Thompson founded Future Capital in 2020 to change the landscape of startup investing across North America. In addition to his role as CEO of Future Capital, Thompson serves on the advisory council for diversity at Lululemon as a member of the board of as a member of the board of directors for QueerTech, a Montreal-based nonprofit organization that aims to queer the tech ecosystem. I like that. And as a venture partner for LOI Ventures. Prior to launching Future Capital, Marlon developed and led diversity initiatives that support founders and investors that he likes for the likes of League of Innovators and Highline Beta. In addition to his work on diversifying the tech and VC industries, Marlon is a current community representative for the Rainbow Foundation of Hope and has served as a refugee sponsor in partnership with the Rainbow Refugee Foundation and the National Film Board of Canada. Marlon, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi.
And my first question, what haven't you done after reading all that?
That's a really long introduction. And yeah, I appreciate you making the space for it. But I can imagine that's a lot of just abbreviations. There's lots
I'm just glad I didn't stumble. I'm just glad I didn't stumble as much as I did. There was some stumbling, but I think I did fine. Well, you know what? My first question is gonna be: do you remember meeting me for the first time?
Oh yeah, I remember you. Well, okay, wait. So my first memory of meeting you was actually coming to your office, but maybe that wasn't the first.
Really? Well, yeah. Do you know there's one because we both were judges at a UBC hackathon.
That's right. Yes.
And you had the biggest, puffiest jacket I have ever seen. I was just like, wow, that is like someone you want to hug. But I think I also confused you because you said your name was Marlon. I thought you said Merlin. And I said to you, wow, you're the second Merlin I've met today, which was a fact. And it must have been a very confusing fact to you because one of my kids' hockey coaches was a Merlin for real, not for you. But I just wanted to set the record straight that I know your name is Marlon, but Merlin would have been pretty cool too, I gotta say.
I really appreciate that memory. I totally forgot about that. Hackathons, that must have been like 4 or 5 years ago. I haven't done one of those in a while. Yeah,
at least it was definitely a while ago. Do you still have that jacket? Because that was the coolest thing.
I have that jacket, and then I got an even puffier jacket from lululemon last year, or actually this year. So now I have 2 big space suits that I walk around Vancouver in.
Amazing. Well, you got to keep dry, right? You got to keep dry. Well, you know what? Future Capital is super excited about your mission and what you do. Tell me about it.
Yeah, okay. So Future Capital is a new company. I started the venture in 2020, August of 2020. And our mission is really to create a new and more diverse cohort of startup investors. So we do that in a number of different ways. I'm sure we'll get into kind of all the mechanics, but really the company was born out of my own experience, kind of working my way up the food chain and in tech and in startups, and I ended up working for a venture capital firm and working in VC. I saw that there was just so much opportunity to broaden the decision-making table, bring new perspectives in into kind of the small group of people that make a lot of really important decisions around what companies get funded. So that's what we're here to do, is really change the game from the top down.
Oh, very nice. Well, how does it work then? How does it differentiate from like a typical venture fund then?
Yeah, it's my favorite question. I think when we called Future Capital, I never thought about how often I would need to clarify that we are not a venture capital firm. So I need to say that up front, because we're not a VC, and that's by design. I think the VC model really works for a lot of people. It's a huge part of the reason that there has been so much growth in advancement and innovation and technology and startups. But we are a community driven and platform for investors. So we work with new and emerging investors, so someone who is, maybe just thinking about investing for the first time, or has a small portfolio that they want to develop and enhance and expand. We work with them, and we meet them kind of at the beginning stages of their journey, and we work with them through basically 3 different pillars. So pillar number 1 is learning and education. I'm an instructional designer by trade, and my background is in programs, and so I really love and believe that learning is an incredible lubricant for upward mobility, to be honest. And just learning and developing new skills is one of the big things that we do, and it's where we got our start. We also work directly with the community to produce and share opportunities. So obviously I've got a network of founders and investors and institutional investors that I want to share with this community of new and emerging investors. And then we also work in partnership with big companies and large corporations to get our message out there, and to get the mission and the initiatives that we're working on into these communities of kind of highly skilled operators. So we work in those 3 different ways, but really the underpinning and the core of what we're doing is developing this brand new community of investors and making sure that they have everything they need to be really successful in the world of startup investing.
Well, that's super cool. I mean, you're starting on the, we'll say that, I guess that's the supply side, and trying to, educate and tool people who, might not have been, it hasn't been an opportunity as much, and you're giving them, you're showing them the path towards that opportunity. Do you ever work on the deal flow side too, or is it just on the investor side? Is it like, just the supply side as opposed to the demand side?
Yeah. We work on every side. I think the thing about venture capital as an industry is that you have to be kind of active on every side of the industry. It's very systemic, the way that it works, and it's very relationship driven. And so for us, I don't think it would work. I don't think what we're doing would work if we didn't have access to really good companies, really great founders, organizations and partners that produce those great companies like accelerators and other programs like that. So, I recently joined LOI Venture, Ryan Holmes' new venture firm, as a venture partner. And that's like just one of kind of a number of ways that we as Future Capital are able to attract really great companies and founders and share them back with our community. So I think like one of the unique and kind of distinct characteristics of this industry is that it's so interconnected and that everybody kind of, it's small and everybody kind of knows about everybody else. So I think for us, we try to work on both the, as you said, supply side. So finding new investors, new communities, and also the demand and producing that deal flow. It's kind of, we do like this survey in our course, and one of the biggest things that new investors, brand new investors want, or at least think they want, is access to deal flow right away. I think there's a couple steps that you need before you get that, but it's something that people come to us asking for kind of right away. So we have to have something to share with them.
Well, that's interesting. And again, I love the mission, but here's a question. If we're talking about, we're trying to expand the old boys network of what a lot of VCs were, how frictionless is that relationship when you're dealing with them? Are you welcomed, or is this a get out of our club? Like how does that feel?
Well, I wouldn't describe it as frictionless at all, but
okay.
But I think, just it more broadly speaking, I don't think innovation is typically frictionless, right? Like for the most part, if you're doing something that is disruptive in some way, you're going to have folks that like it the way that it was before. But what I will say is, I launched this company in August of 2020, and that timing was no coincidence. So, I had been working on this for a while. While I was at the venture firm, it was a project that I was working at while I was employed there, and that company, that firm was really, really supportive. of the project as well. And
Mm-hmm.
I think in the summer of 2020, I personally saw, a window of opportunity open up to do something like this. And we all witnessed, a lot of corporations, including, every venture firm in North America, making these declarations about, creating pathways to, funding, or creating more accessible funding for people of color, and underrepresented groups. And so, for me, that was just the green light to go full speed and at building Future Capital. So I think there is friction with everything, but I think we really, really meditated on when was the right time to do this. And I think post the death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and essentially this massive civil rights movement that happened in the summer of 2020, it feels like the world is really ready for something like what we're doing. And so we kind of bank on that as we go to new partners, and as we find stakeholders in the ecosystem that could be considered competitors. We really think this is important work, and you said so too.
It is.
We say that, right? Like everybody's made that declaration, so we're trying to capitalize off of that, and ask people to put their money where their mouth is. And for the most part, we've had a lot of support, and the friction I think that we've experienced has been more around just doing something that's really complicated and trying to simplify it. And we're working in what I call, like, pardon the pun, but we're working in a white space. So, and what I mean by white space is, like, it's wide open. There's not a ton of examples of how to do this. There's a lot of newness in venture capital. Even venture capital itself is a new industry. So
constantly changing.
It's constantly changing. So yeah, like I think a lot of the friction that we've experienced is like, okay, we're just kind of figuring a lot of it out.
But isn't it nice to be, I mean, again, change is beautiful. And it's nice that you can be part of that change. Well, you mentioned, and I obviously am incredibly pleased to hear and recognize the importance of a lot of the corporations that are kind of putting their money where their mouth is. And now a lot of those, the awful situations that happen in the recognition, of course, of the United States, we have similar histories, obviously, but do you find that the corporations in Canada are up for trying to change the game or improve the game for everyone as well?
Yeah, I think it's such a big question, and it's hard to answer it that generally, because every corporation is different, right? And what I will say is, I'm a big proponent, or my philosophy is really that you can affect change from within. You can also affect change by trying to change the systems themselves and through critique, but I'm the kind of person that likes to change from within. So I've worked directly with a lot of big corporations, some of the biggest in Canada. I won't name any names, but you could find out pretty easily who I've worked with. It's like on my LinkedIn page. But and yeah, I've seen I think in Canada there's definitely been this story of Canada being like the lesser of the I'm trying not to use the word evil, but the lesser of two evils. If you look at the US and Canada as like these historical outposts of colonization. And I think Canada lives up to its name there. I think Canada is a different society. We're a different group of people, where we have different attitudes, and we engage with our history differently than our southern neighbors. But there's still just so much work that we need to do, and there's still so much equity that is not really there for a lot of people in the country. So I think it's when you look at the corporations in Canada, I think they're doing their best, and there's still a lot more to do. I like engaging with people directly versus kind of standing from the outside and critiquing and criticizing. Personally, I like getting involved and kind of understanding how decisions are being made and where I can help move the needle. And I'm going to continue to do that as we move forward. I think, so there's summer of 2020, and then there's summer of 2021 in Canada, with a lot of Indigenous groups, becoming really the point of focus for us as a society. And I think we're still really in process in terms of like understanding the implications of that. I think I can speak for myself. I'm still processing that. so I can imagine like big corporations are also still processing that, but we got to get into action. Yeah,
completely. I mean, we need to be all allies. And you know what I love about how when you described your mission, your first pillar is education, and that's really where it starts. And the fact that you are existing with this mission to improve Canada as a whole, through the investment community, but it's trickle down. It will improve through that vision. I think it's just awesome. Well, you know what I mean. LOI Ventures, League of Innovators. There's LOI League of Innovator Ventures and League of Innovators. Is that two separate things, or is that one thing kind of with a pretty little word innovator at the end?
So League of Innovators is a nonprofit and a registered charity that's focused on developing entrepreneurial acumen and creating like the pipeline of talent for the next generation of startups. And then LOI Venture, totally. And LOI Venture was launched towards the end of 2021 as a venture fund that partners really closely with the charity. So two separate entities, a lot of the same people kind of working in both of those spaces, and very similar mission around really finding and developing and nurturing that next wave of startup and innovation talent.
And that's awesome. And the fact that it's from people like, 'cause I know, quite a few of the people that are behind LOI Ventures, and obviously they're very senior like yourself in the community, and knowing that it's people that have already found their path, that are there to not just help with, monetary side, with the venture fund, but also with the education side again. And I think that is just as important. And I'm sure once you buy in as a venture, when you take a position in a company, you want them to succeed too. So you open up your Rolodex or whatever it's called now, contact list on your iPhone. But that's how you're going to help as well. So, tell me about your role. First off, on the LOI, the League of Innovators side, because I was always impressed. This is what I chat with you about in the past. I was always impressed by this and the mission. What was your exact mission with that one?
So you're referring to my time at LOI. So there you go. The story there, right? So I joined LOI Venture as a venture partner, like I said, in 2021. But I actually got my like sea legs at the organization. So I joined Ryan Holmes and a team over at Hootsuite when the company was called The Next Big Thing. I always say that because there's like a faction of especially in Vancouver, of people that know it by that name. And then we kind of transitioned Next Big Thing into League of Innovators. But I spent about 3 years working on that organization and on that mission. So my role while I was there was really, I think my final job title was the director of programs. But what that meant is I really helped to, develop and nurture a community of, young entrepreneurs with education being kind of the focal point and the biggest value that we offered them. So I worked with, a bunch of really experienced, as you said, really senior leaders in the innovation space. We had, Bruce Croxon, Michelle Romano. I mean, I could keep name dropping, but like a bunch of folks out of Ryan's network and out of our network that came in to really kind of be cheerleaders and subject matter experts for our founders that were in the program. And I think over time, we realized that, beyond education, community was another really big piece of the puzzle and the value add that we were putting out there into the world. So that was kind of my mission within the organization. And to be honest, it was a really formative experience for me as an individual, because coming in, I had spent like a bunch of years working in like super operational roles within startups, but this was my first kind of foray into the ecosystem side of startups and understanding like what is like the broader system, who are all the stakeholders, how do these companies get money? Like I was really interested in the financing side. And when I was working at LOI, I got to get really up close and personal with that process. And yeah, and then the rest is history. I ended up making the leap into venture capital after that. So.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Well, you know what? Can you just tell me, because again, I think that the League of Innovators, the next big thing, I think it was really, really cool. And I think it was formative of the Vancouver tech system, where, you know, giving people at least a good channel to expand their opportunities and their, you know, get products to market and all that. What are you most proud of your work in those 3 years of?
I'm most proud of taking a program and an experience that was in person and really originally centered around, you know, a really small group of really talented people sitting next to each other in the same space, right? I'm really proud of taking that and digitizing it. And I was a big part of, you know, I led the project actually of taking that program, putting it online and effectively scaling it. Like I think the cohort that I stepped into, I might be like somewhat off on these numbers, but I won't be too far off. I think there was like 12 companies, maybe 10 companies. And then the cohort that I left, there was, you know, 30.
Wow.
But then doing that like 3 times a year kind of thing. So we really were able to take this experience, digitize it, and reach, you know, a significantly broader pool of young people with ideas. And I think it's something that I'm most proud of, but it's also something that I've like kind of carried with me through the rest of my career. It's like an understanding of what, you know, what you can do. I think we're also a little bit ahead of our time in doing that. Like I don't think many other accelerators were in going through that process yet. There was still like a ton of value and emphasis placed on like in-person desk space. And we said, you know, why don't we take this online and reach a ton of different people? And that was, you know, the vision of, you know, the leaders of the organization and the board. But I was really, really proud of being able to execute on that and get it from point A to point B.
At scale.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, you know, I want to talk a little bit about Highline Beta, because I think that's an interesting company, because they seem very Canadian focused, as opposed to, you know, I'm Western, I'm Toronto, I'm all that. Like it does have a bit of a Canadian approach to it, at least from my readings of it. And in fact, it feels like now it's turned into a bit of a innovation studio, a little bit more, where they're doing some internal stuff. But you tell me about your work you did with Highline Beta.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I started working on Future Capital while I was there and received incredible support from many of the team members at Highline Beta. And you know, I think you're definitely right about the venture studio model. That's something that the firm does a lot of writing about and a lot of thought leadership on. And for anyone that doesn't know, you know, really what the venture studio model is, it's really a partnership structure between like a venture capital firm and a founder. And the venture capital firm will meet the founder kind of where they're at. It's usually typically early on in a founder or startup journey, and the venture capital firm will really lean in and provide, you know, a ton of support and resources to get the idea kind of off the ground. And I think, you know, one of the my work at Highline Beta was really focused on, you know, the fund side and supporting you know, the development of like a really healthy pipeline of diverse investors into the fund. And but I think with a lot of like firms, you do a bit of everything. Like it's not a big, like venture capital for the most part are, you know, smaller, tighter teams, and therefore you end up, you know, having your hands on a lot of different pots. You're not like sectioned off over here doing this one thing. So I got to, you know, see and work on, you know, a lot of different things while I was there. And I think one of the biggest takeaways for me from that experience was just that, like, innovation is about trying things and being really experimental and even with your model, right? Like I think what you're referring to is that Highline Beta has like a unique model, like a venture model, and I think it's complex, and I love that complexity, and we've brought that that type of complexity into Future Capital, even though it's a very different model. And so I think, you know, some of the big takeaways from that experience is that you don't have to, you can chart your own path, and even at the business model level. Like you don't have to do the conventional VC approach where you've got like a 20-80 rule and like you have like these two ways of making money. You can do things differently, and you can be creative as long as you're like, you own it and you're you know, communicative with the right stakeholders. So yeah, it was really cool. I think being like in venture capital was a really big kind of lifelong goal of mine, and yeah, it was just like a total learning experience.
A lifelong goal of venture capitalists. When did you think you were going to be a venture? Like, when did
Well,
that become your goal? You know, I've never heard anyone. I mean, maybe now kids say that, but I've never. You know, I want to be the hockey player, or I want to, you know, to be a lawyer or something like that.
Yeah.
I want to be a venture capitalist. Tell me when you first thought that was a thing.
Well, I probably only like knew that that was a thing when I started working in startups. So that's about 10 years ago. But I think when I say lifelong goal, I mean, I think of venture capital the same way that I think of like, you know, boards of directors. It's like, you know, that level of like governance and decision-making power. And influence and responsibility also that comes with that power. I think that like that was always a goal for me. I was like, you know, I want to be really, really knowledgeable, and I would never want to be in a role where you have that kind of like influence and authority without having the right experience or you know, the background that I believe is necessary to do the job well. But I think, you know, from the outset, I've always been like really ambitious, and I've always wanted to you know, make a dent and have like some sort of an impact. And I think, yeah, when my first job in tech was at a company called Indochino, which when I joined was definitely a tech company, because like engineering was like the biggest department, and their algorithm was like their bread and butter. I think the company has evolved quite a bit. It's been a while since I worked there.
They've solved a lot of problems since then.
For sure, yeah. And but I remember like I came on board right after they had gotten, I want to say, their Series A funding. Like I was so new that I didn't even know what that meant. Like, okay, like I guess you guys have money, but and I remember like right away like understanding that these VCs were the ones that gave them the money to hire all of us, and for me to go hire like a big team. And I was like, who are those people? I was like,
how do they wave that money my way? You know,
exactly. I'm like, so who are those guys? And I want to know more about that. And so that was kind of, I was always really curious about that kind of like that decision making chamber.
Well, that's super interesting. Well, you know, I mean, you've had, you know, really interesting times, you know, helping grow companies or growing entrepreneurs, I'll even say, because sometimes, you know what, the thing they learn is walk away and get back into the game doing something different. You know, having that conversation. But have you, like, is there any companies of interest that you can, you know, that you share that maybe have come out of benefiting from the work you've done? Though I'm sure they all have one way or the other.
Yeah, could you imagine if I didn't have an answer for this?
Most don't. Right. So
I will say, I'm going to share some of the companies that people will know, and then I'll share some of the companies that people won't know. So
perfect.
Like one of the big success stories from the first cohort that I worked on at the time, the next big thing, eventually League of Innovators. I should just call it League of Innovators to simplify. So
LOI, baby.
LOI, yeah, the Smart Suites. And so Tara Bosch is the founder of Smart Suites, and she built this healthy candy company, a snack brand that exited in 2020 for at the tune. I won't say the dollar amount because I don't know the exact number, but it's hundreds of millions of dollars.
It was public, yeah.
Yeah, it was public.
And as a diabetic, I love what she did.
Totally, yes, exactly. Yeah, it was such a mission-driven business. So that was a big one. And I think the program, we met Tara like really early on in her journey when she was still figuring out like some of the basic problems before they got to like the, you know, eventual scale that you know, really worked for them. I think when I'm thinking, you know, future capital, we work with really early stage companies, and some of my favorite companies that we've supported and worked alongside are also in that CPG, that consumer packaged goods space. And so one of them is actually a company out of Southern California called Belly Welly.
Belly Welly.
Yeah, it's a snack brand of IBS friendly foods. And they've started out with these brownies that are incredible. And they've got like these awesome billboards up in like all over now, but in California and New York. And they're growing really fast, and they're
awesome.
A company. We've worked with Sunscoop, which is an ice cream brand out of New York. Curie, which is a wellness company and a scent brand out of Southern California. And another company that we worked with was Hello, which is formerly known as Heirloom, which is a very different company. So it's a tech company. It's legal tech, artificial intelligence driven platform that helps folks with the process of trademarking. And so I share some of those brands that are maybe lesser known, just because I'm really excited about what they're going to turn into. Yeah, I think
that's fantastic.
One of my favorite things about this work is we get to work with companies at kind of that pre-seed seed stage. So there's a lot of it is about the founder, as you mentioned, and a lot of it is just about being able to see their vision, and it's cool to see some of them already like executing and building that already in such a short period of time.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, you know what? I mean, you're always talking about startups. Have you ever done one yourself?
Yeah, well, Future Capital is a startup.
Okay, give you that one. You wouldn't be here if you weren't a founder, so I give you that one. But prior to Future Capital, have you ever tried it? Tried to go through the game yourself and learn from the hard knocks?
You know, I'd say Future Capital is my first startup. That's the truth, is that this is the first time that I'm building a startup where like my name is on the checks, and I'm the one that's, you know, responsible and accountable at the end of the day. But the last decade of my life, I've been working in and around startups, right? So like I mentioned Indochino, and I've worked at a bunch of different companies at those really early stages. And so I'm like kind of a lifelong student. I've always been really I've always paid really close attention to like how the startups are run, how the leaders are making decisions, what's working, what's not working. So I've been exposed to the experience, but this is my first time like kind of going all in on my own. So that's awesome. We're coming up on 2 years, and I can't think of another 2-year period of my life where I've learned more than the last 2 years.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And congratulations, because you have to have the bug that you got to bite it at some point, right? You just got to jump in. Well, you know, I mean, you must have seen so many, you know, startup types that like I recognize them, that you come across. It's like, you got to walk away, man. Like you have to walk away. How difficult is it to have that conversation? And have you had that conversation? Because I know I have, and it's better when you do.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that as well. I definitely have had that conversation. I think working in an accelerator, like so much of your job is helping people understand when the experiment is done. And so I say the experiment, I've always thought of startups as like these experiments around commercialization. So you're taking an idea and you're taking hopefully an iterative experimental approach to figuring out whether or not you can commercialize that idea. So said differently, if I want to solve the problem of, you know, people, I'll use Smarties as an example, people like taking too much sugar in their snacks, you know, there's a bunch of different ways I can solve that problem. As a founder, my job is to, you know, create a strategy, create a plan, and figure out which one of these ways is actually going to work. How can we commercialize it? And I think, you know, when you're working in the accelerator, you see, so like the job of the accelerator is to actually figure out which ones don't work, and fast, right? You want to figure that out as fast as possible. So I think that conversation is difficult the later it happens in the journey, like more difficult the later it happens. I think at the early stages, if you can figure out that something, there's no opportunity there, and you've only invested 3, 6, 12 months into it, that's a win, because then you can go on to move on to the next idea or the next opportunity for yourself. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that. Like, have you had that conversation?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I've needed that conversation myself. I mean, my first startup failed, and I probably took it longer than I should have. I wish someone would be honest. But one thing that I find in almost everything I do, and this is going to sound a little BSy, you know, markety BSy, but I'm 100% behind it, is I am so bluntly honest with every idea. I call it, like, when I have, you know, startup people that come to me to build their stuff, I call it wet blanket mode, where if they're young and I think their idea might need a little bit of fine tuning, you know, I just say, hey, dude, I'm about to throw, or young lady, I'm about to throw a blanket over your head of water. Tell me how to get out of it. Like, and then I just ask the hardest questions I can. And then I'm like, you know what? I would love to build this for you, but I don't think you should build it, you know, or I find that in my elder years, okay, the more honest you can be with people, the better you serve them, and the better they feel like you've done them a favor. I had one fellow, I've known him because he's one of the guys, and I'm sure you've seen them before, that follows the hackathons, trying to get his product constantly built at hackathons. Always gets it built like a quarter of the way, never the full way. Always says, oh, I want to own this and everything. But I mean, at one point he came to my office just to chat. This is a couple of years back. And he told me that his wife just left him. He's sleeping on the street and he didn't really know what to do. So he asked if he could sleep in my office. And I'm like, well, first off, forget doing everything you're doing. Go back and get a job. I gave him $100. It's all I had in my wallet, because I'm like, you got to get off. You can't sleep in my office for legal reasons or insurance reasons, but you got to stop. Like, you have to figure out how to get yourself right again. And I feel like he did, because I didn't see him out and about constantly doing things, or at least I hope he did. But that was one of those big moments to me of recognizing that, you know, it's a lifestyle, and sometimes that lifestyle can destroy you. And I think it's important to have that honest conversation, make sure that, you know, maybe there's someone that has to play the pathway to find a little bit of salvation in that too.
I really appreciate that example, because I think it gets at something that people are talking more about, but I think should be more central to how we think about building companies, which is like the toll on the founder, and the right kind of structure for building a company, which is going to be different depending on the person. People have different capacities. There's like a really good analogy that I heard once on a podcast about, you know, when someone says my plate's full, or I have too much on my plate, one thing that you have to understand is that people have different sizes of plates, right? Like, you know, I can only speak for myself, but I have like a weird work ethic for sure. And there are periods that sometimes feel kind of manic, where I'm just like, I can't stop working because I've got, you know, I'm like, you know, in a rhythm. And then there are other periods where, you know, maybe I don't have all of the ideas that I had last week. But the toll on the founder is like actually fairly significant. And I think it is important for anyone that's in innovation, especially at the founder level, to have people that will be honest with them and just tell them the truth. Like, when something isn't working, or it isn't working for them specifically, I think that's critically important. And there's probably a bit of a lack of that, I think, in the ecosystem, because it's so results driven. Everybody wants to see that return. So they're like, yeah, just push yourself as hard as you possibly can, especially as investors. We're like, oh, you're working up until 3 a.m. Awesome. I guess my investment is going somewhere. But there's more to it, right? You need the founder to be intact. You need them to be taken care of to see the vision through all the way.
Well, people only really read about the, you know, the Googles and the Airbnbs and, you know, those big wins, but they don't realize that is such a small percentage of everything else, that I think it's really important to be talking about the losses and the learnings. We'll call it losses and learnings, because you're not losing anything. You're just learning from it and recognizing that maybe there's a better thing to spend your energy and time on. Right. So I think it's really important. to be speaking about that again. I've
I think so
I've
too.
done some failed startups. I wouldn't be in the game if I hadn't, because I learned from every one of them.
Yeah.
Well, I just because I love the name, I want to ask you about your role, QueerTech. What's that all about?
Oh yeah, yeah. I just joined the board of QueerTech in 2021, and you mentioned it earlier. Their mission is to queer the tech ecosystem, and yeah, I've got like a bit of a history of working on or working with and on nonprofits and registered charities, and that is just being continued with QueerTech. Um, my role there, like as a board member, is really to support the founders of QueerTech and the executive team as they continue to scale their organization across the country. And the reason that it's important to me, and the reason that I joined the team, is because I know, so as a member of the LGBTQ community, I know firsthand that queerness is a really hard thing to measure in companies, in industries, in society. There's a veil around queerness for a lot of good reasons, and I think the work that QueerTech is doing to really create like these kind of safer open spaces in technology is critically important, because as I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, tech and innovation and startups are, I actually believe, in 2022, like in our modern era, like the best lubricant for upward mobility. Like and so if you believe that, which I believe, and you understand that there's like this complexity around even just like identifying queer people in the workforce, or nurturing queer talent at any level, I really want to be part of like the solution there. I've done a lot of work with other queer organizations that are pointed in very different directions, like the refugee work that I've done with Rainbow Refugee and the Foundation of Hope. And I think, that is some of the most rewarding work that I've ever done. And I anticipate that I'll be able to say the same thing about QueerTech.
I love it. Well, we are all lucky that you are helping multiple communities then, within Canada and the education. And, one thing that I love about, I mean, in our industry of tech, I mean, it's, I would like to think it's relatively open-minded and open-hearted. I know we are, in every front, but I like to try. I mean, I just turned 49. I'm an old dog.
I didn't know that.
And, oh yeah, there you go. Sort of my twin brother. But what I love is the fact that, gender identification, so the pronouns, and the challenges around that, I didn't really understand it. But my 15-year-old daughter explained it to me so well. And she has some friends who want to be known as they. And for me, I want to be, I want to give them the respect that if that's how they want to be identified, like that's fine. But it's so difficult for me just mentally to say it. But I love seeing my kids, how easy it is for them. And that gives me hope.
Yes.
The fact that it's like, of course it's they. Like, why is that hard, Dad? And anyway, I just want to reflect on how much I love that. I think the next generation is going to even be better at this than old dogs like me.
Can I just say, I'm so happy you brought that up, and I think that example that you used is such a perfect example, because just to be really, really clear, I'm still learning, right? Like I identify as a member of the LGBTQ community for sure, but I don't know everything, and I'm still learning about gender identification and the full spectrum of what it means to be non-binary or trans, and I think that it's totally okay to be learning. And I think actually like you said, the next generation has a different kind of understanding and lives in a different reality around sexual identity, gender identity, and I think we can learn a lot from them. And I love hearing people just embracing that that new way of thinking and having an open mind to it. And I think we need to be talking a little bit more about it just openly like that, because I think people get into a mode where they become really afraid of like saying the wrong thing, and that's not actually going to be that productive.
No, but and the conversation needs to be open because it needs to be human, right? Like the first problem is when it's segmented. Well, I'm not part of that community, so why do I have to do that?
Totally.
Well, because I have a good friend, like you talked about the Rainbow refugee. One of my, well, I've got lots of favorite employees, but one of my very favorite employees, he was from, I believe he was from that group where he had to come from a post-Soviet country to kind of get away from things, and we had a couple of conservative Christian, I'll just say not closed-minded, because they're definitely not closed-minded people, but just hadn't been around the community. And boy, did first off, the workplace was so much fun with this fellow because he was such a fun guy. Oh my God. When he quit to move on to a bigger company, everyone cried. Like, it was one of those ones where everyone cried because it was but it was a human approach where I actually watched the one fellow who we thought might be a bit of a challenge with being comfortable, go and give the guy a hug right away. And it's like, dude, this is awesome. Like, it was just so awesome to be part of. And again, I think it's, it starts at not being accepting of everyone. Well, it is, but just being open-minded to everyone, and then try to meet as many people as you can from different communities. So you don't segment anyone, know?
Well, there's, prior to launching Future Capital, we did a bunch of research, and we talked to a bunch of potential customers, and we looked at like a lot of the data, and the data just shows you that we're moving into a more diverse populace in North America. And I think, I'm citing an old data point, so this might be different today, but I know, there was a think tank in the US that projected that by I think it was 2035, the US will be majority minority, right? And you got to think about the world is just going to look very different very soon.
Do you know what my data points for all that is? You might have some think tank, but there's a lot better restaurants in every city I go to now, and I'm so much happier for it because we have so much more diversity.
I know food really is it just breaks down all the barriers, and you could just eat food from a different culture, and you're like, oh yeah, I get it.
I get it, I get it. Well, I want to touch on, because here's another big, and I'd say diverse Canadian or Vancouver success story of Lululemon. You sit on their advisory council for diversity. What's your role with that?
Yeah, so actually, I no longer sit on that council, but I joined. So this was
our researcher will be whipped. Okay,
I blame myself actually for that. But so my role with Lululemon has been ongoing. I joined Lululemon as an ambassador in 2019. And so I've worked with kind of the brand team and the community team to be representative for the brand. And in 2020, Lululemon decided, like a lot of other companies, that they wanted to do more to support diversity within their own community. So specifically based in Vancouver, we pulled together a group of mostly ambassadors, but folks from very different walks of life, and worked through some really big challenges that the company was facing, and again, like I say, like many other companies, realized that it was time to do even more than they had already been doing on diversity and inclusion. And so we really just kind of, my role there was just kind of as a consultant, really just consulting on some of their initiatives and some of the ways that they were gonna really plant the seeds for increased accessibility to their products, to information within their staff around diversity and inclusion. And that work continues. Like I said, my term as a member there is over, but that work continues. And we've actually partnered with Lululemon as Future Capital has partnered with Lululemon to create some content around diversity and inclusion for a live stream series called Sweat Equity that I'm going to plug right now. It's really great. You can go to our website and watch some of the live streams there. But I think just kind of broadly, like I said, I've worked with many large organizations on this type of thing. And I think, we could probably have a whole other conversation about like D&I and corporations. I'm gonna actually this is kind of weird, but I'm gonna plug a movie that I just watched, a documentary I just watched on Netflix called White Hot about Abercrombie and Fitch. That is like dives really, really deep into corporate social responsibility where diversity is concerned. For anybody that's like really interested on the topic, I think they did a really good job.
Good model or bad model that they did?
Oh, bad. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was concerned about.
Yeah, and I used to work for that company like in another lifetime, and oh my gosh, this movie was so good. They just like totally dissected, how to do it really wrong. How do you do diversity and inclusion really, really wrong?
Wow. Oh, well, I challenge everyone to watch that one. I know I definitely will. Well, I'm intrigued. So again, our famous researcher, AKA, there's three of us, but we're digging deep. But I saw that you went to Western University.
Yeah.
So why do you live in Vancouver? You're from Scarborough, from my understanding.
Yeah.
Again, we went deep.
Yeah,
and then on to Vancouver. What brought you out here?
There's two different versions of that story. There's like the personal story and then the professional.
Okay.
I'll tell a mix of both. So, as I shared already on this podcast, like I identify as a gay man, and part of me moving out to Vancouver was because I wanted to have like a bit of a fresh start. But the other part, and like I think honestly the more direct driver, was I got a job out in Vancouver. So
that helps.
Yeah. So like that was, I don't think I probably wouldn't have moved if it wasn't for that offer. But yeah, a friend of mine, or actually an ex-colleague of mine, had left the like big corporate environment that we had both worked in to work for a startup, Indochino, which I mentioned. And she called me one day and was like, hey, do you want to come work with me on this startup? And I was like, I don't even know what that is, but sure. I was like ready to do it, right? So I came out here for opportunity, which I think is kind of unique because I think a lot of people think of Toronto as like the center for opportunity. And I think that mix of those personal motivations of like, wanting to have a bit of a fresh start, and just that specific opportunity were really the reasons that pulled me out here. The reason that I stay here is because I really hate the winter and I hate snow. And I also have really fallen in love with, the lifestyle and the attitudes of like, not just Vancouver, but the Pacific Northwest. I think that they're really beacons of like, just progressive ideas. And I think it's a really great place to live. I love it here.
Well, whatever the reason was, I'm glad you made that jump and didn't buy the return ticket. So that's fantastic. Well, you know what? I just want to think about, because I think you're very ambitious. Like what you're trying to do is, and it's not selfish ambitious, it's community ambitious, which I think is needs to be amplified. But 30 years from now, when you're the 49-year-old like myself, okay, I don't think you're that young. I'm just saying that, but we'll go with that. But what's your legacy? How do you want to be remembered?
Oh, that's a big question.
It's a huge question.
I think you're right to note that a lot of my ambition and the things that drive me are around like creating like different versions of, systems or organizations or, the world really than the ones that I experience. So I think my legacy, just to put it simply, is like, I always thought of like my trajectory in business, like every time I got a promotion or, moved into like a more, challenging role or industry, it always felt really unlikely, like before, during, and after. Like I remember like when I got hired at Highline Beta and, was, in this really, at the time, really exclusive community of venture capitalists, I was like, I can't believe they hired me. And I think my legacy, I want to make sure that it just feels less unlikely. I want to make it more likely for people like me who have backgrounds that aren't, super conventional to reach whatever goal it is that they want to reach within their career, within their life. And I think that's enough for me, is just like really carving out new pathways, making it more possible for people to do well and do what they really
love
want.
it. Helping open doors. I mean, do you want to know a dirty secret of why I got into the startup world?
Yeah.
Because I'm completely unemployable.
Yeah, I think that's probably somewhat true about myself as well. I think that's funny. Like a lot of startup founders are obviously like incredible, but there's like this specific thing about a lot of founders where you're like, oh yeah, it would be really hard to manage you. You know, like
I'm told that all the time.
Yeah.
Well, I love it. I mean, I'm having way too much fun in this one. I almost called you Merlin on purpose again because it's fun for me. But okay, Marlon. But again, afternoon tea. The theme is to talk to Canadian, founders, Canadian companies, or to prepare that next generation of startup or founders. So tell me why don't you share one piece of advice? This is the Marlon advice that you could share to help expedite their journey.
Get good advisors. Get really, really good advisors. And I use the word advisor versus mentor because I think mentors are fantastic. But the only reason Future Capital has been as successful as it has is because I have this incredible group of advisors that are way more expert than I am in very specific areas, right? So I've got someone that's really awesome on communications. I got someone that's really awesome on revenue and revenue leadership and monetization. I've got someone that's really excellent at product, right? And I think that is the only way, honestly, for 99% of entrepreneurs to figure it out. I think if you think you're going to figure it out on your own, you're really going to shoot yourself in the foot really fast because it's not that you're not capable. You're one person. You'll probably burn out. Even if you got 3 co-founders, you need deep expertise around you in order to make it work. That's my advice.
Great advice. Great advice. I 100% get behind that. And also, if you are going to get advice, don't just, if you're the tech guy, don't just get the tech advice. Get advice outside of your expertise, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Because you want to be rounded.
Some of our best advisors are just customers, like people that we are building our products for. Like those are some of the greatest advisors for us because they are honest about what they'll use and what they won't use and where they'll spend their money. And
they'll also accept 3/4 of the way with the idea and the vision of where it's going to go and help you find it. And people don't understand that it has to be 100%.
No,
never. Never. Find the people that understand your vision and support it, and then have them help find your stride towards it.
Exactly. Oh, that's such a good way of framing it. Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, here's my favorite question because I always love to hear people's thoughts on this because this is, where we wave our flag, from sea to shining sea. It is the afternoon tea or something like that. Can you share the name of a Canadian entrepreneurial star or founder that you personally look up to?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I've been thinking about this for a while.
Okay.
It's a hard one for me. I don't know why, but I think of, so the person that keeps coming to mind is Mark LaFleur from True Local. And I'll be honest, it's just, I think it's really inspiring to see people like you, especially as like an underrepresented, like severely underrepresented minority. Black people just don't get funded. They don't have these exit stories. It's just very rare, unfortunately. And I've always like really looked up to Mark and entrepreneurs like him. A lot of the entrepreneurs that inspire me, I think of come from the States as well. So, but in Canada, I think, Mark's story has been really incredible. I've always been a big fan of Shahrzad as well. Shahrzad Rafati from BBTV. I think just the way she built that company was like really cool, really impressive. I think she's a really interesting figure. And then I could probably keep going, but I'll stop there.
That's awesome. I mean, those are 2 fantastic people. And I mean, with Shahrzad, I mean, it's her vision and it's her vision. That's what I like about it. That, and I saw her at Collision a couple of years back. She interviewed Trudeau, and she had the nicest hat. Like it was just this beautiful big hat that only she could pull off in such an elegant way. I gotta say,
I can think of. I see the picture in my mind. Actually, I've seen it.
Oh man, are you going to be at Collision? I hope you're going to be at Collision this year.
I think I'm going to be at Collision this year. Yeah,
we're going to hang out then. I bring the puffy jacket.
This will be my first time at Collision, so I'm really excited.
Really? Yeah, it's a fantastic show.
I joined as like a viewer virtually. I think they did a virtual one last year.
Yeah, last year. It wasn't the same thing.
But yeah, this is going to be different. Yeah, this is going to be good. I'm going to be back in Toronto, my hometown, and yeah, I'm excited.
Hey, we'll all run naked through Scarborough, right? That's what we do. That,
but I support you. I support you.
Marlon, thank you so much for sharing. This has been way too much fun for me. I can't believe I call this a job, because this is way too much fun for me. But thank you for spending time and also for such the mission-driven work that you do to make everyone better. Because you may be thinking about, hey, I focus on maybe two communities. We've got QueerTech and we've got the African population here, but by doing that, you're expanding it for everyone, because you're making education and opportunity so much greater that it gives opportunity across the board. So thank you. Even while focusing on, say, 2 groups, which is an amazing width already, the breadth of that is monstrous, and I really appreciate all you do for it.
Thank you for saying that, and thank you for having me. I've been really looking forward to this conversation, and yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you in person. If it's not before our conference time in Toronto, then I'll see you in Toronto, and that'll be fun. I'm excited for it.
Either way, anytime you're in for tea, I'm up. I'm down. I'm down and up. You know what I mean. Excellent. Well, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.